Hey there, fellow melee enjoyers, it's Malthor here once again, and the next build I decided to tackle was another melee situation, and it's one I have not played in quite a while, maybe like 5 years, something like that. It's Dual Strike. So Dual Strike is not the same thing as Double Strike, don't get it mistaken. Double Strike is the one that is the boys, where you get Vile Double Strike. Dual Strike is simply attacking with both weapons at the same time, and hitting, I don't know, pretty hard, I guess. And it is a very simple, clean skill. So it's probably one of the cleanest sort of situations you'll come across in PoE, graphically and just screen clutter, because all there is to it is you just attack and there's a slight strike animation. Of course, you can incorporate like explosion, Herald of Ash, all kinds of stuff. My build currently does none of that, and with this build, the special thing I've decided to go for is trauma stacking, which is one of the new gems that gives you additional physical damage per stack of trauma, which also increases the amount of physical damage it deals to you. Now, the only way to do that with swords is to use Varunastra. Since trauma cannot be used with swords, claws, daggers, otherwise, Varunastra lets you do that, and then as Varunastra, we are all weapon types, and we can scale using all kinds of other weapon nodes, but mostly still sword things. But the main thing you do with Varunastra is use some fat cluster jewels that give you both sword and axe damage at the same time. So it still has a lot of scaling, but the difficult thing with Varunastra is deciding where to spend your precious passive points, because there are so many things that you can take to scale your build. In the end, the build is just basically revolved largely around physical damage reduction scaling. As a Slayer, I am taking the Frenzy node to get max Frenzies, which then converts into endurance charges. So at all times, I have 9 endurance charges. I've then also gone out of my way to get a bunch of other physical damage reduction and made myself damn near immune to physical damage, basically, so that I can stack trauma a bit more. But it's not going to be a super heavy trauma stacking build like some other people have gone with theirs. Varunastra still has some decent base damage, and then I haven't really leaned too heavily into maximum trauma stacks or anything. I don't have max in like increased duration. I don't have temp chains on myself, anything like that. It is simply usually up to about 20 trauma stacks, and then mitigating all of that damage through damage reduction and Slayer Leech as well. So ultimately, it's a pretty tanky build. My only real weakness is, I suppose, elemental damage, because I wanted to get spell suppress into the build, but just could not justify it with gear and points in the end. But physical damage reduction is absolutely insane, and then got good overleech, got perma fortify, have some damage reduction from leech, and in the end, yeah, it is pretty tanky for what it is. And hopefully it'll take on some end game. I've got currently something like 10 to 15 million DPS, and then that can be doubled with Heat Shiver if something is frozen. And some things will be. A lot of bosses in the end game probably won't be, so I'm not really counting it as true DPS. But the freeze into a bit of extra damage situation is pretty potent, but for the most part it's just the freeze, and it really does come in clutch during lots of situations, as I was hoping this character would build into something of a Sanctum runner. So because you attack very fast, because you move very fast, and then hopefully one-shot things and freeze things, it should lend itself pretty well to Sanctum, even though it's a melee character. I know a lot of people have fear of melee and Sanctums, and they're like, lol, melee Sanctums. It's pretty good. Like, if you can get a melee character to hit hard enough to freeze things, to be pretty fast, pretty reliable on its crit rate, then Sanctum is fairly cakewalk. Previous Frenzy Rakiata's thing was pretty good for Sanctum. This one's probably about as good, maybe a bit better, because there is, for what it seems, a bit more freeze potential and more one-shotting potential, since my crit, I think, is a bit nicer, and probably hit a bit harder. Similar enough to the Rakiata's character, though. Either way, a lot of my physical mitigation doesn't mean shit here, because we're not trying to get hit, so there is that as well. You build a lot into defense, and then ultimately doesn't really matter too much. But on the plus side, we pretty much won't be dying to just random things during Sanctum. It's only resolve and other stuff that counts. Inspiration, that's the one. But yeah, some of these rooms definitely can be very bad for melee. Of course, these last Desecrated Crypts, I think they're called, for the last floor as a melee enjoyer can be pretty annoying, especially with all those volatiles going off. But I've done a couple of successful runs. This character only just hit 90 like very recently, and done a couple of successful runs. They've been okay. If this one in particular had no flasks in the end and had a bunch of bad stuff, so it did try and take me down, but it still worked out and got there in the end. So it's been a good build so far. I've enjoyed it, and we're still ramping and seeing where it can take me. But it's tough to build a Varunastra. I still feel like I've missed out on a lot of things, but for now, it's going well enough, and I want to show you how I've taken the character to this point so far. I'll try and make this quick as I've got a stream to start. Level 92, about to hit 93. Y is sword. Of course, trauma and sword and Varunastra, very confusing for a lot of people. As you can currently see, those are my resists and damage reductions and stuff, but that's without charges. I do keep these boots with me at all times, so I can just snap on max charges pretty much always, and it's nice to start a map out, a new sanctum, all that sort of stuff. It's a little bit annoying, but honestly it feels comfy to just get your charges up real quick. And then I'm max estimated physical damage reduction, but that's of course going to factor in some armor and stuff, but for the most part I am damn near maximum, almost as much as I can get. So 9 endurance charges, we have Slayer damage reduction there, we've got Fortify, I have stolen the Gladiator Outmatch and Outlast, which is 10 physical damage reduction from endurance, as well as 10 more for frenzies. But I suppose the main thing I should talk about is Varunastra. Still a pretty powerful weapon, a little bit underrated maybe in today's melee world, but counts as all one-hand melee weapon types, so you can take axe nodes, you can take dagger, claw. It's really hard to utilize in some builds because it's a lot of travel and stuff, but the main draw, I'd say, is the ability to use large clusters like these, which deal axe and sword 12 of each. So once you've actually boosted it up, something like this is pretty much ideal. 35 effect, 3 attack speed, those are the main things you're looking for. Once you got those boosted up, every single one of these points ends up being worth 32 damage and 4 attack speed, which is pretty crazy when you've got 10 points to take and then a couple of dual sockets. So to roll these, I basically just alt regal, so every time you see 35 effect, Org, and then regal it, see what you get. Every time you see 3 attack speed, Org, regal, see what you get. Otherwise, you can use harvest with like speed rerolls, but that's probably a bit more costly. Eventually, you come across some good stuff, and there'll be the bread and butter for the damage scaling in this build. Then also got Megalomaniac that gives me quick and deadly, but most importantly, the Fortify from Overlord, since we are using a scepter, mace, or staff, technically. We then also have Megalomaniac that gives me Enduring Composure and Feed the Fury. As a Slayer, I've also taken this tattoo over here for 80 increased maximum total life recovery per second from Leech, which should help out Overleech quite a lot since we're taking all these points. I just took 1 wasted point over here, but in theory should probably take these 2 next life nodes, since I'm using Utulas for a lot of extra life, and I've taken like 50% life on the tree at the moment. I've got 3,700 life. These next 2 points will bring me up to like 4,200 or something. So it'd be pretty crazy if we do that. I'll decide if I want more life or a bit more damage still a bit later, but probably life at this stage because I do have a decent amount of damage. Other than that, got a Lethal Pride over here that just gives some crit multi and some double damage. You can search those on the POB tree. At least a couple of each is usually what you should go for. Double damage, multi, something like that. Other than that, yeah. It's a bit of a weird tree since I do have to go heavily out of my way for frenzies, since I'm frenzy stacking. So it might not be the most efficient, might not be the best way of building this character, but like I said, we've gone for this frenzy thing so that we can have lots of endurance charges. Got the base crit up, we've got impact, and then brutal fervor. Other than that, also using heat shiver, so A lot of the time, things are frozen. Some of the time, things won't be frozen. Throughout the video, you might have noticed that my Trinity isn't up a lot of the time. If you're one-shotting things, our Trinity is not going to be up. It's only when we freeze things and then hit them with that extra fire damage. So realistically, you don't need Trinity when you're one-shotting things. You only need it when you're not, and that makes enough sense that it's fine. But maybe it's wrong. Maybe I should use something else, like Ellie Pen. Unlikely. Trinity's probably still good. I am using Anomalous Dual Strike just to be a bit less melee at the moment, but there is another one that can give you 10% more damage. Might be better to do. Other than that, I am running permanently, pretty much, Ancestral Call with Elemental Damage with attacks, Endurance on melee stun, since that's worth 36 more damage for us, and Trauma. So Trauma doesn't factor into the build too often, but when things get a little tankier, you'll see in the end of that Lycia fight, after we're stacking to like 10 to 20 trauma stacks, I'm like damn near double my damage, if not more. That's when it really starts to kick in, and that's kind of why we've built with Varunastra and Trauma and stuff. It works out, but there's definitely bigger Trauma builds out there if you want to build specifically around Trauma. So then with the Toolers, that means that I don't have life on anything else, just getting Chaos Res and some Res and stuff and whatever. Crafted these just using, this one I think I crafted using Essences or crit rerolls from Harvest. And this one I just bought for 20C or something. No one cares about this type of stuff. Using +1 Forensic Hero Sorrow to convert all of my physical to cold. Using a Darkness Enthroned with just attack speed, a little bit of life and accuracy. And this one's just attack speed and global multi. The life jewels don't count towards the tools. And then running Windscream for a second curse with a Ellie weakness. And then running a Eyes of the Great Wolf, which cost me, I think, about a divine, maybe less, which is just fizz reduction and lots of multi. Since I do want my fizz reduction, that's a bit more there. And Arctic Armor, of course, gives us a bunch more fizz reduction too when we're standing still, which is pretty much always. When we're attacking, you won't be gaining any trauma stacks without standing still. So then I've got Determination, Hatred over here. Determination at this point and Armor at this point of my character isn't doing all that much, but we may as well get a bit more. And you could do something else in place of that instead if you really want. Other than that, yeah, the usual totem setup. Got Whirling Blades and Life Tap, Assassin Mark on hit. And also using the Balance of Terror for that extra damage for Ellie weakness. I think that's all I need to say for now. I'll level the entire way with Dual Strike. Just use Melee Splash and Ancestral Call until you pick up this node over here. And then you can take out both if you want, but for clear, it's pretty nice to have Ancestral Call still. I'm not sure about my Casting Damage Take and Immortal Call. Maybe I should be using Molten Shell instead. Not quite sure, but currently I am fucking around with this that procs every now and again when we're just attacking, because that's just how it works. As far as MTX are concerned, if anyone wants to know, it's just the new mystery box stuff, Snowcaller. Pretty clean little Arctic looking set. And then I've also been running that with it. So I'll probably take this character through to Ubers, see how it performs there. Could use a bit more life and a bit damage reduction for Ellie, but we'll see how we go. It might be good enough with the DPS it's got. For the most part, this is just a nice character for me to map with and Sanctum with, and I do love me some Sanctum. So thank you very much for watching. See you guys next time.